I realised that big light now is shining in my glasses. Never mind.
Hey everybody, welcome to the live event, Take a Stand. And if you haven't heard already, I'm interviewing 35 amazing women who are all sharing their lived experience of triumph over trauma. Now, these stories and the insights can be quite hitting. They can be quite hard to hear. So please, please, please make sure that you get the support it is that you need. If you hear Helen say something that piqued your interest and you want to find out more, please do reach out to Helen. Her information will be at the bottom of the YouTube video, so you can connect with her directly. But as I said, this is women's experiences of abuse and the trauma it is that they have experienced and how they have managed to navigate that and come out the other side in, let's say, one piece. So, as we were on YouTube, can you do me a big favor? And I always feel like I'm selling myself here, which of course I am, but can you please consider subscribing to the channel if this topic interests you? If you can think of anybody who this would be of value for, please do share it. Remember to click the notification bell and give us a thumbs up. And if you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments box below. Okay, I've sold myself now. Like, we can get going. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Really great to be here.
Yeah. So, whereabouts are you again?
I'm currently
You're in the UK now, aren't you?
But I go back to my home in France in a couple of weeks' time. So that's where I live permanently.
Nice.
I've been over here for just a couple of months to help out with family members after a family death. So I kind of came over.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done my bit, helped everyone, and then I'm going home to live in silence.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's get stuck into the story, because this is obviously the most fascinating bit for everybody to hear. Can you share a story of triumph over trauma? Obviously not the detail and going into it, but just an overview so people can get a sense of your experience for us.
I was thinking about this and kind of thinking, where do I start? And so I think, so I'll keep it brief. But from the age of 16 to 24, I was in 3 abusive relationships, one after the other. The first one was very much a kind of, even though it's 16, your age of consent and all that, it was still a very grooming relationship by a much older man, and had, at 16, you don't have the street knowledge. You don't have that knowledge particularly. So I was kind of drawn into this relationship that was extremely unhealthy. But I didn't see it at the time. I didn't necessarily feel it at the time either. It was one of those things that it was kind of after it ended that I was like, I was able to sit and think, when I was 18, 19, when it ended, that, oh gosh, all the things that he had been doing, all the things that he had been saying had completely and utterly deconstructed my self-esteem and self-worth. I had no idea who I was. I couldn't describe myself. I didn't know the kind of young woman I was supposed to be, and I held a lot of blame actually for that relationship ending. He just actually literally disappeared from my life. I don't know where he went. I don't know. He just disappeared after 3 years, and I was sitting there thinking, well, it must have been me. There were lots of things that happened within the relationship, that now I look back on them in my much more kind of skilled and knowledgeable way, and think, my God, I wish somebody had intervened. I wish somebody had noticed, But because of that relationship, it led on to me not being really noticing of the narcissism and the emotional abuse and the control, the coercive control of then 2 other men after him. And really the kind of final relationship was the worst. In the set of physically, it was the worst. It kind of put the nail in the coffin of my self-esteem and my self-worth and my self-identity. And despite that, though, I still managed to complete my first degree. And, nobody perhaps would have noticed when I was at university. They might have called me aloof, quiet, they might have felt I was quite distant, unfriendly. Actually, I was just trying to get through, and I knew what I was going to, and I knew how awful it was going to be. And I just couldn't say it. I didn't know how to say it, because I think if I hadn't have had the previous 2 relationships that had done a really, really good sabotaging job on me, then I probably would have been stronger and more courageous and able to walk away sooner. But I wasn't that strong, confident, calm, courageous girl. I was the underconfident, shy, anxious, unworthy of anything kind of girl. So it was a really, it was kind of a period in my life where there was just one after the other. So the sense that I had then was that this is all there was, this is all there, this is what I deserved. This is, it must be me. It must be, who's the common denominator? Well, it's me, it was all that kind of psychological stuff, that cognitive kind of stuff that you go through. And then I remember distinctly on the day that I graduated, and I was walking back, and I thought, this isn't my story now. I distinctly remember I was walking back. It was freezing cold, and I was walking back, and I thought, I need to live my life for me now. I've done something for me, and that means then that I have to use that and push myself into that, rather than being pulled into a direction that would have meant I was nothing. And I'd already been through that for several years. So I remember that almost. I'm not even going to cliche it by saying it's a light bulb moment, but it was a moment of clarity. It was a moment of realizing that I'd managed to do something for me in spite of everything that was being done to me, and it was an important moment for me. And I went to my dad, and I kicked him out of the house. Not my dad, the man. And it was not my dad. I would never do that. But I kind of, I with a friend, who was my lodger at the time, actually, who was also his friend, who had seen everything and been, horrified by everything, but didn't know quite how to intervene. But I went to him at first and said, I need you to help me get him out of the house. And he did. He was fantastic around that. And then I went to my dad and explained to him not everything that had been happening, but explained, what I'd been kind of living through. And my dad's first response was, would you like a vodka? It was kind of, it's like, no, Dad, I'm cool. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't need a vodka. So I was able to then say things to my dad that I'd not actually been able to say to anybody else for quite some time. And in fact, often not at all, not actually being able to say the words that this is what had been happening, and this is how it made me feel. And previously I'd done a brilliant job of self-sabotage, and if only I was thinner, then they wouldn't do this. If only I was this way, then they wouldn't do this. All of those things that we go through when there's abuse. If I'm a different way, if I'm not me, then they won't do this to me. And that's not true. They're doing it because of them, not because of me. And so I remember that clarity and just then becoming this woman that then, you know, I've forged my career. I've trained myself. You know, I've done all the things that I've wanted to do in my life. I'm adventurous. I move at the drop of a hat. You know, I move countries at the drop of a hat. I just, you know, and I'm in a beautiful relationship now, in one in which, you know, he allowed me to heal my relationship with me first.
Nice.
And instead of me thinking, oh, you know, he's going to be exactly the same and he has to prove it to me that he's not the same. It wasn't that at all. He's an incredible human being because he allowed me to heal my relationship with myself first. But that clarity in that moment of walking away, of saying, this is no more, this is not me. I need to live my life for me now. That was an extraordinary moment. I'm not saying it was all kind of, you know, Walt Disney after that, but, you know, because there was a lot of hard work, you know, to do with myself and for myself, to really understand who I am and who I could be at that time. Who did I want to be? Who is she? Where is she? So, you know, part of that was also, you know, deciding where to go with my career and things like that. It was just really kind of defining Helen, you know.
Yeah, who are you?
Yeah.
I mean, those relationships started from a young age, and it's like we hear it, don't we, time and time again, that what we learn just becomes normalized, but actually it's far from normal. It's our lived experience. So how would we know any different?
Yeah. Exactly. And you know, I think because the first one was on the surface very subtle, you know, nobody would have seen, you know, in fact, you know, I spoke to my dad before he died about it. And, you know, he said, I just thought he was a lovely man. You know, I thought he wanted to look after you. I thought, you know, and I was like, well, you know, that's the impression he gave, you know.
Yeah.
And he did that incredibly well. You know, he drew everyone in, not just me. So it was a shock even to my family when he just disappeared. And interestingly, he tried to turn up 25 years later. He found me on Facebook. Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was because at the time, of course, I'm married now, so my name is different and all of those kind of things. And at the time, my Facebook page was private, and so my personal one. And so he had to find me by going via my brother's Facebook account to find my sister, to then find me. And I just got this message in my messenger inbox, which was the same type of language that he used to use. And I was like, wow, who does he think he's speaking
This is
to
familiar.
now? Yeah. Okay, 25 years later, you must be 50 something now. And I just replied with, you seem to be under the misunderstanding that the woman that you are messaging is the same girl that you abused so many years ago, and you couldn't be further from the truth. So you need to go block, delete, delete, block. You know, I thought it was quite extraordinary. I thought, my God, you know, that's some ego that's going on there, you know, to think, oh yeah, I can do all of that to that young woman, you know, and yeah, turn up 25 years later and she's going to be like, hi, you know, and no, I wasn't any of that. But you know, it's really interesting because lots of people ask me about my story, and I kind of do explain it, but I also think it just doesn't define me. I've learned lessons from it. I've learned about who I wasn't, and who I actually am, and I've learned lots of things about how I engage with women who are working with me, for example, and young and children, because I occasionally work with children still. But it's not a story that defines me. The story that defines me is the after,
Yeah.
And the little girl that, was adventurous and curious and imaginative and creative, and, she just lost her way in the middle. But she was able to come out again. So I'm still very playful. So I tap into that too.
It's a good point that you've just raised, actually, about trauma defining you, your story defining you. I think it still defines you when you're in it and you're living it, and you haven't dealt with the emotional and the rawness, and you haven't healed from it. Then I think it will still define you, because you're not separating actually who you really are. Yeah, who you really are to actually the trauma it is that you've experienced. And I do this thing where I have a conversation with the traumatized side of my personality, a bit like the inner child. Actually, it is the inner child. I just call it something different. So I have a conversation with the trauma side of my personality, because I can still quite easily slip into that. It's quite easy for me to still slip into it. So I have to nurture her from who I am now, from who I want to be, who the best version of me, not the trauma that is actually defining me and making me insecure, fearful, afraid, small. So balancing the two things. And I think this summit is really important to help women see that the experiences it is that they might be going through now isn't necessarily how it is always going to be.
No. And it is
you have to take a stand for yourself.
It's almost kind of the first question that anybody asks me when they want to work with me, which is that, Helen, will I feel any differently than what I do now, which is that insecure, fearful, anxious? And I say yes, and then they say, well, they then get a bit combative and go, well, how do you know? So because you're looking at her, you're looking at someone that's been through, a significant amount. I haven't gone into the detail of it, but a significant amount. And I get to define who I am. I get to let her live rather than just surviving. Surviving is fine. It gets you through, it keeps you alive. But actually, you want to live. And there's a difference. And so, yes, when you're in that trauma, when you're in those relationships, when you're in that abuse, when you're surviving through it, yes, it does define you. Sadly, it does. But acknowledging that it doesn't have to be that way, and it can change, and you can emerge, from that and flourish from that into the woman that you want to be, or the man. The woman or man that you want to be, that's the important thing to hold on to. But it's often very much when you're in it, it does define you, and it is then the how,
how. I mean, sometimes I feel like in the past, I felt like I've slipped into a black hole and I've just got stuck in a well. And then every now and again, I'd feel myself go, oh, I'd be like, there I am. Hello, Wendy. You're back.
Because there will be, people say to me, oh, will I be, will I always be skipping and everything else? I'm like, no, because there are things that will happen in your life that will affect you, and it will take you back to those insecurities, that vulnerable part of yourself, that the fearful and unsafe part of yourself. But when you've done the recovery work, when you've done the healing work, means that you are able to, for want of a better word, because I think it's an overused term at the moment, but kind of transform through that, and not have it. Yeah,
and a conscious choice.
And it's exactly. And that is what the healing is. It's having a conscious choice about who you are, and how you manage those challenges in life, and those periods of time when it does come back, and you kind of sit and go, oh, right. It's all there. No, oh yeah, okay. So the moments when you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, I can't do this today, I just want to.
It makes sense. It makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you, your abuse happened when you were young, and it happened over years. It wasn't just one incident where something happened and, you had, you experienced trauma from that incident, from that one thing. Emotional abuse goes on and on and on. It goes on for years and years and years. So it's not surprising that we are a work in progress, and we can't just click our fingers and it's all completely resolved. We can detach from the emotional energy of it, and we can put things in place to help us to deal with things and move forward and not get emotionally triggered. But it baffles me when people say they can heal people in like 2 sessions. I'm
like, you've made me twitch now.
Let's not go down that road. But I'm just like,
it is my biggest. But
we are a work in progress. We're a work in progress.
I always say that healing isn't a destination; it's a journey. Okay, because if because you're human, and there will be days when what you experienced, whether it was mine. Over those years, it was emotional, it was psychological, and it was physical abuse. And so, there are moments, there are times when I might see something on the television, where I might see somebody walking down the road and they look like that person. Or there's times when something happens in my business and I'm kind of like, and it taps into that little Helen, that young woman Helen that was insecure and fearful. It taps into her because she's still in there a bit, because that's the nature of it. She's still in there. It's just actually the core self, me, is looking after her and saying, it's all right, I've got this, But there are days when she comes forward, and I have to nurture her and say, it's okay, I hear you. I saw that too, and so it's a continuing journey, but it's an incredibly powerful one, and it's an incredibly enlightening one, and so it's I'm with you. Anybody that says, 2 sessions or in 4 weeks I can heal your trauma. No.
Run
for the hill.
Sorry.
I'm not saying that it will take years and years and years either, but you get to the point where you are much more empowered in yourself, that you wouldn't need therapy anymore, or you wouldn't need the trauma-informed coaching or anything like that. You might need to tap into it in later on again, but no, but it's much more of a complex process of recovering from those traumas, to discover your true self, to let her emerge or him emerge, and allow them to be in control, allow you to be in control, and calm and confident and courageous and vivacious and empowered, and all of the things that I am, and all of the things that anybody that has worked with me is asking, that's what I want to be. And I say, well, she's in there. Yeah. She's just been hiding. The trauma has been hiding her. She is in there. I promise you. But the trauma's just done a really, really good job of hiding her. The trauma, the abuse.
Trauma does an excellent job.
Oh, it's a fantastic. I mean,
it's
you know, it would win at
incredible.
it would win at hide and seek. Let's face it. You know, it's
Every time.
every time.
It's every time it would champion, because it creates such a false sense of self. I think that's the thing. It creates an illusion and a false sense of self. And for me, I was always living in my past. I was never living in this present moment. I was always making decisions based on things I'd learned that weren't healthy, that weren't right, that weren't going to help me. And I think the beautiful thing about the work that you're describing is it allows people to open the door to possibilities and opportunities that they may not necessarily have seen before. So they can start to move away from that past and into the present moment and into the future. In the work that you do, is there like one common thread that you see? I know you work with lots of different ages, and you also work with organizations and individuals as well. So the question may not be specific enough, but can you think of one thing that you see that is like you see it every time, you recognize it every time? It's the one thing that it's like the common thing that everyone has in common.
Shame. And the ability the inability rather, to be able to, in the first instance, look at me or look me in the eye. It takes a lot for the women that do come to me. I kind of want to change this, you know, because therapy shouldn't be for crisis. You know, therapy is normal. It's a normal process. But often what happens is women and men and anyone who has experienced trauma kind of holds on to it. And they might do all the kind of work around life coaching or mindset coaching or, you know, money mindset and all of those kind of things in terms of their business. I work a lot with business and entrepreneurial women. So they do all of that stuff, but there's a part missing. But it's the part that they often aren't able to talk about because of shame. And so a common thread in the very first kind of experience that I have with anyone, and I do work with men occasionally, they when they ask nicely, because I've got three.
Would you like to rephrase that?
No, it's more. I don't mean it in that way. I mean, you know, it's because often men will struggle to approach a woman for help. And so I don't mean it in any kind of derogatory way. It's just my sense of humor.
Of course not. It's just my humor. That's all.
So you know, when I say that, it's purely in jest, because I actually do work really, really well with men, and I've worked a lot with the police and the Met. So, you know, because I think it comes from I come from a very male-dominated family, and so, you know, as the tomboy girl in the family growing up, you know, I do actually get on really well with men, and you know, I'm not soft with them, because that's not what they want either. So, but where was I? What was I saying? Oh yeah. So the common theme, if you like, that's very much kind of coming through, and you know, whenever anybody is contacting me, is shame, is the feeling of shame, the ability the inability to look at me, to the shame in voicing what's happened to them, and having to and wanting to, from my perspective, help them to understand that they don't have to live with that shame. So, you know, that is the most common theme in terms of the emotion that is there. But the common question is always, can I and will I feel any differently? Because they don't actually know that there is a difference.
So that must be incredible when they finally reach that point and the light bulb moment hits, because for me it was definitely a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was like a slap in the face. I was all of a sudden I was like, I've got a choice. Oh my God,
Yeah.
I've got a choice.
Yeah.
And then everything changed.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, you know, it's. I did. In fact, I think I did an email to my email list last week about shame, and it is that light bulb moment. It's a breakthrough moment when you realise that actually the shame is, you don't have to hold on to it. It doesn't belong to you, because you're carrying that shame because of what somebody else did to you, what experiences that you've had. And when it's toxic shame and it seeps into the cracks of the vulnerability and the blame, the self-blame, like I said, you know, it must be me. Who's the common denominator? Well, it was me. You know, shame's like, oh, thank you, blame, I'm coming in, you know.
We're having a party.
We're going to have a party. We're going to get into the cracks, and we're going to live with you. We're going to make you feel really, really shit. And so when I starting to work with women, that's what they mean when they say, "Will I feel any differently?" And it is around the shame. And it's similar with children, similar, but in a different. They express it differently.
Right.
But very similar with children. Often with children, it's the not being able to verbalize it. So I work very much with puppets and things like that, and so they're able to share their story in a different way and share how they're feeling in a different way. So yeah, but what I see in adults is when there's been childhood trauma, is that often it's the first time that they've spoken about it when they come to me. Or it's the second time, and this is the time that they're believed, because they've tried before and not been believed. And that all links with the shame. That all links with the shame.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing insight into your story. I think it's really interesting to hear the perspective of, you know, it went on for years and years. It wasn't just one person, but then that led to a relationship with another person, then a relationship with another person, until you basically said, okay, enough is enough now. I now need to start focusing.
Yeah.
So before we close, what would you say to your younger self? If there's one thing you could say to your younger self, what would you say?
I would say to her, call out for help. You know, it was probably one of the things that I didn't know how to do. Didn't know how to say it, but call out for help in any way that you can. People will come, you know, and they will show up for you in ways that you could never imagine. And you're absolutely under no obligation to keep anyone in your life that cannot support you in the way that you need.
Powerful message. That's great, Helen. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. As I said, if anyone's got any questions, leave them below in the chat box. That would be absolutely awesome. Helen's details are in there as well, so you can also reach out to her privately as well. Don't be afraid to do that. It's just a case of, I think, is it your website link we've got that you can just click through to?
Yeah, it should be the website link. Yeah.
Click through, book an appointment, have a chat, no obligation, you know. But as Helen says, don't deal with these things by yourself. You don't need to. There are lots of people out there who can help and support you. And as I've been saying throughout this live event, taking a stand isn't necessarily about taking a stand against other people. Taking a stand is taking a stand for yourself and putting yourself first, because this work No one else can do it. It's an inside out job. It starts with you. And when you can take a stand for yourself, you develop the strength then to deal with other things in your environment around you. So I'm going to sign off again. Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to see you.